High FM, 101.9 megahertz of life.
Very good day to you. I'm Howard Feldman. I am CEO of High FM and also the host of The Morning Mayhem. Joining me today in studio, but not really studio, is Ambassador Mark Regev. Mark has been on and continues to be on the forefront of media, fighting the fight, and in fact, maybe waging a war that has become more and more significant in Israel's fight for its own future. Mark Regev, welcome to High FM and welcome to South Africa.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Can I just start off by saying I retired from the government a small while ago, and I'm now teaching university. And so anything I say is now my opinion, not the government opinion. And I mention that because a lot of your viewers, especially in the Jewish community, will remember me as the government spokesperson. Yeah. And so what I think now is what I think. I'm now a pensioner of the state of Israel. Yes, I received how many pension they can ride on a bus for. Oh, okay, fine. Sorry if I don't know what that age that is. That wasn't an insult. But does it come as a relief to be able to actually speak your mind, or was there a certain amount of safety within a scripted response? So I remember when I left the government, I started running a weekly column for the Jerusalem Post in the Friday edition, and so everyone could read it on Shabbat. And the idea was, I remember feeling liberated that I could finally say what I couldn't say when I was there. But I think I was living in a misnomer, because you can't have a professional doctor. No matter if you're a doctor, and that's what you do your whole career, you still where you behave. And so the fact that I was a diplomat for 30 years, I'm no doubt there are things that are in my system that are still there, and it's part of me. As you know, I had a job that I took pride in and that I did with conviction for a long time, and though I no longer have to do that job, there's no doubt it's still part of me. It will never leave me.
Right. Is it therefore quite difficult if you were to come across something that really bothers you and you would be more critical of government than you could have been as a spokesperson? How difficult is it for you to present that?
It's actually, first of all, because I was in government for 3 decades, and for 1 decade at the highest levels, just working in the Prime Minister's office and so forth. So when it's like the famous joke is, people like to eat a sausage, but no one wants to see how it's made, right? So I understand, I think, more than the average Israeli how the decision-making process works, because I've been there and I've seen it goes up. And so whenever a decision is something that I wouldn't have personally done, at least, I think I understand the logic behind it.
If there is a logic, right. Yeah, well, sometimes we fail to see that, which is a bit of a problem. And so were you out of the official position when October 7th happened?
Correct. I wasn't officially retired then, but I'd taken a leave of absence.
Right.
And I was teaching at a university in Israel. And I was writing every week for the Jerusalem Post. And I thought I had a good life. And I remember in October, it was actually interesting, if I can tell the story. I learned from Israelis, especially the more secular ones, but not only. We were on holiday, right? Because it was the Sukkot day, of course. Yeah. And we were in Portugal. I'd never been to Portugal before. Oh, you went to Israel. Wow. Days. And my sister had come from Australia, and we were all meeting in Portugal, and we were doing this tour. And we flew back to Israel on the Americans call it a red eye. Well, South African will understand, yes? And we flew back from Lisbon to Tel Aviv, landing at like 6 in the morning on the Friday morning.
Wow.
That's October 6th.
Right.
And we came back because a friend had a wedding of his daughter that day. And we went to the wedding. We came home, we slept for like 2 hours, then we went to the wedding. And it was this wonderful, wonderful day. And the wedding was in Jaffa with the ocean and great food. And I saw all these old friends that I hadn't seen for ages. It was near perfect. I even took the the grandmother of the bride to where she was staying, because I'm a good friend of the father of the bride, and she was older and she didn't want to stay to the very end, or she would do, I don't know. And so I took her home, and then we went home, and it was near perfect. And I remember we went to sleep that night early because first of all we had a flight, and we were exhausted. But it was a wonderful day. And I remember on October 7th waking up thinking I was hearing thunder. And Israel, thunder in October, it's unheard of. And it was very strange, literally. And I went downstairs. If I was my children's age, I would have talked straight at my cell phone. But because I'm my age, right, I turn on the TV news station. And there are all these amorphous reports about something's happening in Gaza, and there are missiles on television, but no one knows. And at the beginning, which part of Israel are you in? I live in Modin, which is between Central, very central. There was no siren, but there was these booms. And at the beginning, I interpreted it as, okay, first of all, I said, this is a strange, because usually you have these rounds of fighting and there's tension before, this happened out of nowhere. And then I just thought, okay, we've been through this before, it'll go on for 2 days, 3 days, like it has in the past, it cools down, and we're back to normal. And then I remember there was a picture on the television and I'm sure you are familiar with the image, of the white pickup truck in Sderot, with the terrorists looking like ISIS people with their machine guns and their bazookas in the main street of Sderot. Someone from one of the apartment buildings had taken the picture on the cell phone, and then the network got running with that, and that was when there was and then the heli dropped. Then I said, this is not right. This is not just more, not just. And that evening and night, everyone understood this was war, and not just another round of fighting. And I remember my university was in contact with me. Maybe we'll do something well established. They wanted me to coordinate a war room at the university where students from international students could do online, if they volunteer for it. I was going to force them to do it, but do online, explaining Israel's position to the world and what has happened. And everyone wanted to do something, right, to help out. And then I thought, I'm going to sit at the war at the university, or I'm going to sit at the war, And I sent a WhatsApp to a friend who works for the Prime Minister, and I said, do you want me to come back and help out? I'm happy to do so. And of course I didn't hear back. And it was Sunday morning and no one had contacted me back. And I thought, Mark, you're a has-been. And I started working with the university about this thing we do. And then I think it was Sunday night. I got a phone call. Why aren't you here? You're supposed to be here. You're supposed to be that's typical of Israeli. Yeah, that's you. Don't tell you, yes, come. Yes, I want you here already, right? And I remember driving my car in, and the Prime Minister was very gracious, and he said, do your stuff. And I took a leave from my leave of absence. And the first few months of the war, I was there.
What was the Prime Minister like that Sunday night when you saw him?
So when I saw him, I always thought that Netanyahu was best in a crisis. That's what I thought. And I remember from the very beginning, at close up, I thought he was, I thought, something like they say about Churchill, right? That Churchill rose to the occasion. He was considered a maverick. He was considered this, but when, World War II breaks out, he comes, and I think Netanyahu is like that he, in a crisis, that he shines, right? That's that's my impression.
So his demeanor then, because you didn't answer that question.
So demeanor, what is demeanor? Like everyone was under pressure, myself included. Everyone understood that this wasn't more of the same, that we entered a new period. I just, I don't have a particular demeanor response. I thought he's very much in charge.
Okay. So he gave that air. Because there's, and I can't believe I've forgotten the name of he passed away, the guy, he wrote The Prime Ministers. There's a line in his book where he says, where he describes a scene. He was advisor to the Prime Minister, 4 Prime Ministers, and he described, he was B'nai Akiva from Manchester, and his name was, yes, I should remember, so should I know in Versacom, anyway, he passed away. Yeah, and there's an image in the book that he describes where one of the prime ministers or all of it, or whoever had to decide about going to war, closes the door of his office, and he's alone. And that moment of absolute loneliness, knowing that you have the whole fate of the nation on your shoulders, your decision, and knowing that people are going to die and lives are going to be changed forever. And that's kind of how I imagine Netanyahu didn't have a choice. It was given to him. The war was there. The reasons and all of that are notwithstanding, it must have been a time of personal immense pressure, shock, and disbelief in a way.
All of the above. And there's a Mick Jagger song, "Lonely at the Top."
Exactly.
And I think it is for any leader of a country in a time of crisis. It's lonely at the top. Yeah, and there's another cliche, which where the buck stops here. They know ultimate responsibility. No, you are right when you're suffering. There's a difference when you're making a decision to go to war, and you're quite shocked. There's a decision versus a decision. These people are,
Them were full. Under control by anybody.
Yeah, no, it took us, people forget this, it took us like 3-4 days to throw Hamas out of Israel, right? Yeah. Or we could go on offensive either. But it was clear, I think, on those first 2 days that, look, this was war. They'd breached the border, they'd rampaged into Israel.
Right. It was an inspiration. There's no other way to put it.
No.
You then find yourself in the position getting involved with information, and Israel very clearly, and certainly I could see it, anybody could see it, wasn't prepared or maybe didn't appreciate that media was another front in the war. Maybe because you don't see so visibly, one doesn't see visibly people dying, but the damage that the media war against Israel has done and continues to do is tremendous. Take me through the approach that you think was October 6th versus today. Is there an appreciation of how important the media war is and information is, and do you think that enough steps have been taken?
So I'll answer your question, but from the other side. I'm talking about me personally, not how Israelis feel, not how the government, but how I feel. I've come to the conclusion that we don't give up and we have to fight, because there's a minority of people out there who expect us to fight, and they want to hear the case for Israel. But I think it's a must battle, because there are two phenomena that are very, very serious, that at the moment we can't change. And any good general, right, in a traditional war, has to look at the forces against him and where they're positioned, and where do you put your forces? And you have to know when to attack and when you retreat and when you hold your line. You have to study the battlefield. So when I study the media landscape, I have to acknowledge there are two forces that the other side has that I don't have, that give them an amazing advantage that it's very, very difficult for me to overcome. Once again, it doesn't mean I give up. There are good people around the world. There are good people in South Africa who want to hear the message, and we've got to make sure the message. But I would use the word illusion, that if only Israel did this, and there's this magic thing, there's this red ball, it was just an illusion. And I want to explain what those issues are. And it's good it's a podcast because it's more than a soundbite. But the first one is the fact, and you're aware of this, but most people are not, is that because Hamas is an authoritarian, brutal regime, they can control all the information coming out of Gaza, right? They control the narrative, they control the visuals.
Seen that the number of journalists,
Like news journalists say, me go like this. If you're a Gazan journalist, and let's say you work for Reuters or AP, and most of the media will pick up the video and the audio that comes from Reuters and AP, right? You will only take pictures of things that you know that Hamas agrees with, that support the Hamas narrative. Because if you take a picture of something that Hamas doesn't want you to take a picture of, you and your family, will pay consequences, and you might not have a job tomorrow.
right.
That's the nature of an authoritarian regime. It's the same in Russia. It's the same in China. There are things you can't do. And so how many pictures have you seen of an injured child in Gaza because of an Israeli raid? Thousands. Have you seen a single picture, one, of a Hamas terrorist/fighter injured in a Gazan hospital? One. And the answer is
No.
And so
Interesting. I've never even thought of it. It's the accents that it's harder to think of. Yeah.
and I can talk more about this. But journalists who are working for international media, for Western media, they are living in a authoritarian society under strict rules. And if they want to stay healthy and keep their jobs, there are some things you don't take pictures of.
Right.
Why were there no pictures of any of the tunnels? Why was there no reporting about this huge tunnel network in Gaza? That everyone in Gaza knew about it, the journalists knew about it, but they knew what they could report and what they could not report. And I would listen sometimes to some of the moving story that a young 14-year-old woman who was posting on Instagram that their family had left, Khan Yunis, and they'd moved somewhere else, and they moved, and the terrible Israelis were forcing the family. If the young 16-year-old girl, or however old she was, said anything about Hamas fighters in the area, right, she wouldn't be around. Maybe she could even be a fictitious character. We don't know she's real even, because it's an authoritarian regime.
Right.
I can give countless examples. And not only, I said there were two reasons. Okay, give me the Hamas, I want to come back to that one. Hamas's terror regime and their ability to control the flow of information, to control the pictures you see, to control the words that you hear, to control the stories that are being made. That's a huge advantage that we can't control. Of course, Israel, we have an Israeli perspective, but we're a democracy. Half the Israeli media is looking for the government to make mistakes and is wanting to report that, yes? And there's no, it's just great work on just trying to dismantle Israel. So how can you win? You're fighting a war with Gaza, and all the information coming out of Gaza is Hamas talking point, curated. Second point, the United Nations. The United Nations is institutionally biased against Israel. Not Mark Regev says so. No, we Secretary General of the United Nations and Ban Ki-moon both publicly addressed this issue separately in remarks about an obsession and that this isn't right. The current Secretary General, our Portuguese friend, who will finish on the 31st of December, Guterres, instead of him trying to deal with this problem, he's embraced it. He has. And the whole UN structure, day after day, a report comes out here, a report comes out there, a statement here, it's all super critical of Israel. Nothing to balance that. And what's the problem? In most of the world, including in South Africa, the Secretary General of the United Nations is a secular pope, and the institutions under him have this moral authority. The cachet of this is, if the UN says there are these, I
had this discussion this morning with an expert on lawfare, and I said, even knowing how problematic the United Nations is, when I see a headline saying a United Nations report, I take it seriously.
And I shouldn't. But if I read a UN report and they say in Sudan there's a humanitarian crisis, I believe it. Yeah. And so why don't normal, reasonable people, if they say there's something going on in Gaza, and people don't know, except people in the know, but most people accept it at face value. And once again, if the UN says this, and then you go all these UN institutions within the UN who are putting out all this, and we also be frank. The UN institutions in Gaza have been co-opted and taken over by Hamas. And so once again, you get all these UN institutions that are parroting Hamas's talking points. Right. How can you win when the UN is against you? And once again, this is the secular poker of humanity. And all of these just coming out, I would ask people this, is there really this red magic web button that you can do to change the narrative? It's very, very difficult. So
here's a theory, and I'd love your thought on it, is I believe that the reason that it's problematic is if you look at it from a pure marketing perspective. I don't know if you're an iPhone user or a Samsung user. I happen to be a Samsung user. If you're an iPhone user, I can give you 10 reasons why you should buy Samsung and you shouldn't buy iPhone. And that one would be right. You're still going to buy iPhone. Why? Because the facts are irrelevant simply because Apple is marketing status. Right? It's not about the facts. You could convince me, you could give me 10 reasons why iPhone is better than Samsung, but I'm still going to go with my Samsung because something about it makes me feel like a little bit of a maverick, and I'm not succumbing to pressure to buy. You can try and convince me with facts, but actually the facts are irrelevant. We know the facts, and what happens is, I think, in many cases, and I see it with us, we defending Israel. Israel bombs a hospital. No, here are the facts. Israel didn't bomb the hospital. But you've already lost it because there's the emotion about wounded people, children, women, a hospital, how terrible. If the emotional battle is going to do all the work that the facts don't do. So what happens is we keep responding with facts, as we have to do because we've got to know the facts. And at the beginning of the war, since October 7th, I think Israel was very good at it. That we could get, in fact, I was really so impressed with how quickly those of us on the front lines were receiving this information that we could counter. But the problem is we didn't stand a chance because it was never about the facts. And to some extent, the war is being fought on two different battlefronts. And I don't know, or battlefields. And I'm not sure how that changes.
So I want to put this problem, which is at the moment insurmountable, into perspective.
Okay.
What we're talking about is called by the professionals soft power.
Yeah.
Okay. South Africa is a soft power leader in Africa and in the world because of your unique history in this country, right? This struggle for freedom and so forth. I would like to be a soft power, and Israel used to be, right? A soft, super. Everyone read Exodus, yes? Everyone loved the Israeli story and so forth. Now we are losing terribly with soft power, okay? But in the real world, in the 21st century, we're facing hard power challenges. And with them, we're extremely effective in dealing with those hard power. So if you look at where we are today, what are we? Nearly 3 years since the October 7th massacre, where we are in Gaza, where we are in Lebanon, where we are in Syria, where we are with Iran. And maybe in the real world, Jews say, Dayenu, it's enough. Right? Maybe we should take appreciation of the fact that in the life-to-death struggle, right, we have come out of the abyss, and October 7th was the abyss. Or it was like the ravine at Babi Yar. We climbed out of the ravine and we punched back. And we have a strong country and a safe country. And our enemies have been substantially defeated. And maybe that's the important thing to remember. Maybe, as you say correctly, on this information, we can hold different truths. And I'm going to give you I want to quote Golda Meir. You probably heard this. Okay, it doesn't matter. Golda Meir, I think there was a while that she was underappreciated. I think people are appreciating her more in recent time. She famously said, and it's true, she said, I prefer a bad headline to a positive obituary. Okay? And if winning our war that was forced upon us means bad headlines and bad votes at the UN and condemnation. But the most important thing is to win the war.
Absolutely.
Have the countries protected.
Yeah, because it's this whole notion of people love the Holocaust. They love the Holocaust, and everybody proves they're not an anti-Semite by how sad they are about the Holocaust.
And it should never have happened.
Of course, it should never have happened, but at the same time,
Yes.
we facilitate it happening again. It's really just no. The reality is that there are so many gains since October 7th, and many of these things, of course, as I say, we can hold different truths. Let's talk about your view, your impression of South Africa. You hear. I would love to hear your thoughts on what you see in the press, what you read, and what you know about government versus what you're seeing. Talking about different truths.
Can I go back in that? Do we have time for me to go back about? Well, I'll tell you a story about. You talked about people like Jews when they're getting killed, and they feel sympathy, right?
Yes.
So when I was the Israeli ambassador in London, the leader of the Labour Party was Jeremy Corbyn.
Okay.
And he was not a friend of Israel. And I remember he would come to the community Holocaust remembrance. He said, "Yeah, that's wow." And I had to give a speech to that after. I didn't, of course, mention Corbyn. That would be not doing my job as ambassador. You don't get involved in the internal politics, right? But I gave the following speech.
Right.
I said, there's the picture of a Jewish boy in the Warsaw Ghetto holding his hands up. The famous Jews wearing the cap, and everyone feels empathy for the Jew when he or she is a victim. And that's our natural state in the world. The Jew is the victim. He is discriminated against, and it's terrible, but he is. But what if the Jew decides he doesn't want to be a victim? Do you still have empathy for him then? Right? And I think it's an interesting question. I know. I think it's something much deeper. But to answer your question about South Africa, it's tough for me. My grandmother, must have been like 14. My grandmother visited South Africa when it was still apartheid.
Right.
And I think she came to some, National Council of Jewish Women's Conference or something. And she came back and she bought me and my sisters T-shirts, with animals, visit South Africa. And I remember we refused to wear them. Female 14, because we said, this is apartheid state.
Mm-hmm. And I remember it actually was an apartheid state.
Yeah. And I remember when there were the changes here and Nelson Mandela became the first president of New South Africa. It happened at the same time as Oslo. When everyone thought the Israelis and the Palestinians are getting their act together, right? And there was this positive feeling, right? And so Oslo didn't turn out so well, unfortunately, right? And which is a separate story, which we don't have time to discuss. But I think there was a feeling. I remember Nelson Mandela came to Israel. I think it was at the beginning of the century, and we thought we were going to have a good relationship with you, South Africa, and it didn't turn out that way. And you can probably explain to me much more why that didn't happen.
Yeah, except that I can't, because it's probably a combination of so many things. I would say corruption, state capture, the fact that the South African government, I'm not even sure what they believe in, actually. I'm not even sure I believe that they're anti-Semitic. I'm not even sure I believe they hate Israel. I think they are flagrantly dishonest in their approach to so many things. And we can see what, unfortunately, you're in Johannesburg, you can see that the degradation of a city. It's all about corruption, and it's all about putting one's own personal needs ahead of the country. So why would your international approach be any different? If you're prepared to put your own personal needs and greed ahead of the people of the country, why would it not apply to the way you look at your international?
So I will say something, and then I'm going to answer your question.
Okay.
The first thing, when I was the Israeli ambassador in London, your foreign secretary, but it's called something else in South Africa, a minister, it's a national corporation. Yes. She speech at Chatham House, and that was very prestigious. And it was about South Africa and the world and all. And it was very interesting. I wasn't there, but I read the speech. She set up her speech, and everyone thought she'd talk about Africa and development and North South, and she started off the speech. The first 5-10 minutes was about South Africa's support for the Palestinians.
Oh.
And I thought, that's very interesting. That's the first thing that she wants to say to the international community.
Doesn't that tell a whole story?
Yes, it does. Is it real care?
And only after that, the chit about development and all. Yeah. But now
I want to take what you said. And to say, you said, well, people are looking after their own interests. They say Israel has very good relations with countries across sub-Saharan Africa, right? And we do all sorts of projects, either private sector for.
Oh, I didn't say country's interest. I said personal interest because. Oh no. Of course, we all know that. No. This is the perfect way to shoot yourself in the foot. I said personal interest and personal greed. Very, very different. That's how South Africa's landed up in this position in the first place. And yet, the magnificence of South Africa is that you don't feel in the streets of South Africa, with the people of South Africa, you don't feel this at all. You grew up in Melbourne, and I wanted to ask you this question, looking back, looking at, and I don't know how much family you've got there. Many of my contemporaries finished school here and went to Australia, and it was unimaginable that Australia would be dealing with what they are dealing with now. South Africa isn't, obviously there's always the concern because we live in the world, but we don't feel it the way others are feeling it, which is just so strange.
That's very interesting. And I heard that for the first time this morning when I read from the Jewish community, because you've had murderous attacks on Jews in Australia, in Britain, and in America, and in unfortunately, it's and in South Africa not.
I'm a target potentially. I certainly get online death threats. I'm not exactly somebody who's much loved. I have no qualms about wearing my kippah and walking out in the streets, because I do not believe, obviously, you can have a bad person. There's always a few, but as a general rule, I don't feel it, and I should feel it more than many others. It's an incredible thing. What is your mission now?
So I'm now, as I said, I've retired from government.
Yes, you're promising to retire. I can sense that.
But I teach now at university, and so a lot of my job is trying to.
And teaching what?
I teach international relations, and I teach a BA seminar, I teach a BA course, I teach a master's course. I teach my two favorite. I teach a course on Israel and the United Nations, which we spoke about a bit before.
Yes.
And I teach a course on Israel and U.S. relations, which is our most important relationship.
Uh-huh.
And we do the history of that and we discuss. So I do that. I do a podcast every week like you do. Well, you do more than one a week. I do one a week. It's called Israel Undiplomatic. It usually comes out on Wednesdays, but you might have to change the day because of my teaching schedule. Okay. I am familiar with them. I try to keep myself busy. And I do other things as well. And I'm a happy person. I want to tell you, I'm not just a happy person, but I live in a happy country. Can I say this just before we finish up? Because I know where we go down. People can often think, rightly or wrongly, that Israel must be a terrible place to live in because you've got the terrorism, Hamas in the south and Hezbollah in the north and Iran shooting rockets and so forth. And on the face of it, But when the UN, which as we know is not particularly pro-Israel, we've discussed it, yes, but the UN does their happiness index every year, and they put their methodology that they apply evenly to all countries. Israel consistently comes out as more happy, not just more happy than South Africa, but more happy than the United States. Like we right at the bottom.
No, than Canada, than Britain, than France.
We're close, where we were 7 or 8, depending on each year, right? And what is it about Israel that our citizens are happy? Once again, it's counterfactual, it's counterintuitive. You'd think Israelis wouldn't be happy with all that. And so we're doing something right. And I think what we're doing is right. is that we have a dynamic, pluralist, liberal, entrepreneurial society, which means people are free and can do what they want and can pursue their, and at the same time, and that's all Israelis, right? That's secular and religious. That's people who are Jewish and Arab, right? Everyone. And at the same time, so we've got this free, open, entrepreneurial, increasingly affluent society. When I was in the ambassador in the UK, we passed Britain for GDP per capita. And I remember smiling that day because the British were our former colonial masters, yes? Right. And the other reason, though, is there's that, but there's also, we in Israel have a sense of community. Yeah. And this structure is very strong, there's the purpose, a reason for being. And that combination of the freedom, the liberalism, the pluralism, the entrepreneurial culture, you know, sitting in Tel Aviv by the beach, drinking your espresso, right, enjoying life, working hard, but knowing how to enjoy, and at the same time, which in a lost of Western, you know, the joke in America that if you have children, you see them twice a year on Thanksgiving and Christmas, yeah? In Israel, if you don't come to your secular Israelis, not just America, you don't come to mom for Friday night dinner. Yeah. You have to have hard reason. Yeah. Strong family structures, strong roots, strong sense of community and belonging. People don't feel alone. There's some things we're doing very good in Israel.
Absolutely right, and so much that we could take away from it. And even the UN has to admit it in their happiness index, because they never want to say how annoying is that. That's probably why they're not happy. Yes. That is where we do need to leave it, Mark Regev. It's been an absolute delight to chat to you. Certainly we could continue, but we're getting signs from all over the place that we are out of time, so we do need to end it here. Hopefully it's the first of many. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening. I'm Howard Feldman on Chai FM.